Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tech Immigrants. Today I'm with Payman and our special guest, Jason. Hello everyone. Welcome to the session.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Jason. This is an honor. I can't thank you enough on behalf of the community. I know we're going to have a great life today, and we're going to learn so much from you. Okay, so let's start without any hesitating. Can you give us an introduction, whatever you like, about your background, what you do, and what you're doing right now?
Sure. So I'm Jason Lengstorf. I currently am the creative something at Learn with Jason, which is my company. I help companies that are in the dev tool space do a better job of connecting with other developers. Prior to this, I was the VP of developer experience at Netlify. I have worked at companies like Gatsby and IBM. I ran an agency for years and years before I did all that. And I actually got into tech without a degree. I'm a career switcher. I started out as a musician. I was a touring musician, and I learned to code because my band wasn't very good and we couldn't afford to hire any help to build us a website.
Oh, that's amazing. What was you playing?
I was the vocalist, and they gave me a guitar, but I'm pretty sure that was only to stop me from dancing.
Did it work?
It kind of did, yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear. That's a success for them. Okay, let's get into the question. I've been following you for years now, and I'm kind of addicted to your lives, and I basically try whatever you're trying. The same, like I try. I haven't attended to the actual live, but I almost immediately watch the YouTube on YouTube session. So the pattern with your YouTube channel is you bring someone who knows a lot of things or build a very good tool or a platform or is an expert like on CSS or something. And they try to explain something new to you, and you try at the same time. And it's like at the end, you're trying basically everything, right?
That's the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal. And I do that too. I love it. But my question is, a lot of people think that you only need to focus on your stack. You need to get an expert. If you're like a React developer, you should do that. What are the benefits of trying new things and go to the domains that you're not familiar with?
So I think when you're first getting into any career, the most important thing is to build a set of skills that you can get hired to do, right? Like it's sort of the hierarchy of needs, where the first base layer is you need to have a skill set that you can get paid for. And so I think when you're first getting in, the best thing that you can do is specialize. Think about, what will somebody hire me to do? And if that's React, then great, go do React. But as you get into that career, by going broad and experimenting with more technologies, with different areas of the stack, with skill sets that are, adjacent to the one that you got into the industry for, you get two benefits. The first one is you're going to get a clearer picture of what parts of this job make you happy, which makes this career more sustainable. If you enjoy what you're doing and you can find ways to do that thing that's enjoyable for income, then you're less likely to burn out. You're more likely to kind of excel in the role, which is going to lead to more advancement and just a longer, happier career in general. And then the other part of it is that by learning these adjacent parts of the stack, you can, for example, if you're in React and you start going deeper into the JavaScript stack, you start to learn why React is the way that it is and where it could potentially improve, or where other frameworks have strengths, or, it helps you avoid the tunnel vision of one tool and trying to use that tool to force all problems to fit into that tool's domain. So it makes you more flexible. It makes you more well-rounded, and that tends to have a high impact on, again, on your mobility as an engineer. You can go further in your career. You can solve more problems. You're faster. It helps kind of in all of the right performance review metrics, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a very good case scenario part that you may find something that you're happy to work with, but there is no balance of how many jobs are for different stacks. I mean, even Vue.js, I've been working with that for like 5 years, but still it's a rare job posting everywhere. And I only can imagine. I love working with Astro and Quick right now, and the concept behind those, like mixing different frameworks in Astro, or a lazy execution or generating code in Quick is super amazing. But like when you work with React every day because you have to, not saying that React is bad or not, as you said, you should have a sustainable job and a living. But at the end, sometimes it gets confusing that is it useful? Should I invest more on just what I have to work with?
So I think I'll give a concrete example. When I was at IBM, I walked into a system that had been growing for years. It started out as I believe, a backbone app. And then later on, there was a jQuery layer built on top of it for more interactivity. And then even later than that, someone had built a React single page app on top of the existing monolith to make a certain part of the dashboard more interactive. Yeah. And that decision led to this particular part of the app having a very complex throughput. Like the data that came from the Java monolith had to then go up through all of these layers to get to this React single page app. Yeah. And knowing React, I knew how to work with the single page app part. But because I also knew jQuery, because I also knew JavaScript underneath, I could start to see how everything was coming through Backbone and jQuery, and I saw an opportunity to skip it entirely. And I was able to take this page from being one of the slowest pages on IBM's dashboard, and my team and I refactored it to be React only, with a slightly different handling of the middleware, because I knew enough about Node.js to tweak the data in the way the monolith was handing data through. And we got this to be one of the fastest pages on IBM's DApp. So this was, yes, I was in a React role, but big companies typically don't throw away old code, which means that when you go to a company that's had React for the last 5 years, they probably didn't start writing code 5 years ago. And for that reason, you're probably walking into a code base that has a lot of legacy, Java or vanilla.js or a lot of jQuery or things like that. And having an understanding of how those things fit together, having an understanding of how the puzzle pieces match up, makes you a stronger dev. And so in my React role, by knowing more about how the rest of the JavaScript and front-end ecosystem worked, I was able to immediately impress everyone on the leadership team, because I did this thing that everybody else thought was impossible because they thought only about React.
Yep, that's a great approach to get to that point. Well, now with your weekly sessions you're kind of in the position that you have to learn new things. You have to be in the session. Someone's talking to you about new thing, and you have to try it. That's the whole system, right? What's your suggestion to others to have a continuous learning?
So this is hard, because this is, I can only tell my story, and my story has put me in a position to have freedom to dedicate time toward this extra learning. That being said, I think it's a little bit like luck, in that it seems like I've just been fortunate, but I've put a lot of work in my previous roles to show that it pays dividends to give me this type of freedom. So what I would say is, when I was at other companies, I would usually be the one to volunteer to take on experimental stuff or to try to proof of concept something. And I would take that opportunity to learn new tech. So another example at IBM, which is not a well-known center for front-end innovation, I convinced them to let me run an experiment with GraphQL by saying I would fix their data layer, because that same dashboard project that was so slow, one of the reasons it was so slow is that we had several dozen microservices, and each of them had an API, and we were making a bunch of parallel REST calls to all these different APIs. And I realized if we could centralize that, we could solve some problems. So I pushed for an experiment. The experiment was, let's use GraphQL as a middle tier, and we allowed me to do some caching, some things like that, and all of that led to huge gains. But I didn't know anything about GraphQL when I started. But I had demonstrated to them that I could make things faster if they let me work on these complicated problems. And so they gave me the freedom to put about 10% of my time into experimenting with new tech. And once I'd set that precedent, they never really lifted it. In fact, they expanded it. It became about 20% of my time. They wanted me to be expanding and seeing what else was possible. And then I leveraged that, what I had done at IBM, I leveraged into a startup role that was almost exclusively exploration. So I think what I would recommend for any developer is see if there is a 10% time budget at your company. A lot of companies do encourage exploration. And what they'll do is they'll say, we have 10% time, but then they'll do nothing to create that space for you. But if they have it, create that space for yourself, right? Like take the tickets that fill 90% of your time, and make sure that you do leave that 10% and take advantage of it. Because I will never say that somebody shouldn't take time on their nights and weekends to learn if it's fun for them to learn, but that shouldn't be the way that we advance in this job. Like, it shouldn't only be available to somebody who's willing to put in more than 40 hours. So find the cracks in your day job that allow you to learn on company time in a way that benefits the company. So that can be 10% time, that can be R&D projects, that can be experiments that would, benefit the UI in some way. Those sorts of choices also show the company that you're invested in making things better. Right. And that's different from like, I'm willing to burn myself to a crisp to do whatever the company needs. It's I'm here because I want to do better work, right? Not more work, but better work. And I think that sort of thing really, it signals to leadership in a company that you're someone to invest in further. And I've seen that happen, not just for me, but for others who have made the same investment. And they've done it without having to work. They've done it with families. They've done it with hobbies. They've done it with their nights and weekends free. So it doesn't have to be a grind. It can be a choice that happens inside of company time.
Yeah. You mentioned the proof of concepts. That's my trick. Like whatever company I work for, I always try. Well, you need to understand the product of the company you're working with, right? So I'm always trying to find an idea that the product team, like the product managers, are working on, but it's just on paper or just some charts. It's a whiteboard. And I try to create the POCs for that. It's not production ready. I'm learning something new. I can do whatever I want. It's just a branch. They can run it locally to see what happens. And there are benefits for me. First, I learn a new thing. Second, I know the product better because I have more relation to the product side. And third, over time, because I'm always volunteer for this, I gave more than 10%. That it's like advertised that, okay, you can work on different things for 10%. It's like, I'm always volunteer. Now I can have more time to make more POCs, to have something live to see and validate. It could go to production. Yeah.
You're a dream. I just was thinking you're a dream developer. I would love to have developer like you in my team.
Well, it's not always paying off. So, sometimes it kind of be like paying for others. But I enjoy it. I always enjoy it to learn more about the product. Um, you when I was watching one of your live sessions, and I heard it, I think it was something like related to React, and your guest was asking, "Okay, just write a React component, like a simple one," and your response was like, "Yeah, I was working with Astro for a few weeks now, and can you tell me like how did you do it?" So you can know everything on top of your head at the same time, right? And when I was watching, I was like, this is like live interview. Like when you go to live
Hmm.
interview, three people looking at you and said, okay, write it down. Write a code top of your head that works and is like clean code, follows the standards. Yeah, I mean, it could be stressful. I was watching, I was like, this is hard to do. Um, I wanted to know your thoughts on live interviews. Are they good? And there's one thing you cannot ignore that some company has, and your suggestion how someone could have a good live interview, like coding one.
Yeah. So I think that there's a broad spectrum of what a live coding interview can be. I think that if companies are using live coding interviews to ask trivia questions that any engineer would Google, then I personally see that as a big red flag that the company doesn't understand engineering. If they're bringing you in for how much trivia you have locked up in your head, they're not interviewing for the right things. And if the engineers on the team see it as a rite of passage or a hazing ritual, that because their interview is terrible, your interview needs to terrible, that is not, it's not a healthy vote for the team. But what I've seen that I love and that I think is really healthy is using the code interview to do a code review together or to do pair programming together, because both of those things are things that will happen inside of the company. So the way that I've done it is I have set up my tech interviews, my coding interviews, to be, you bring some code that you're proud of, and we're going to walk through it together. You're going to tell me what you liked about it, why you think it's good, what you considered, what your alternatives were. I'm going to know more about how comfortable you are with code by having you explain the choices in a code base to me than I'll ever learn by asking you whether or not you know the difference between margin and padding, right? Or whether or not you can tell me how to sort a binary tree. Like those are trivia questions. Anybody can learn those by memorizing a book. Talking me through your decision-making process in real code only comes from experience. And being able to explain to me why you chose this particular, why you wrote a reducer function instead of using a state management library versus, using a database or whatever the different options were, hearing you reason through those, you're going to tell me so much about what you know as a developer. The other thing that I like to do is I like to take one of our repos that we actually work on, preferably an open source one, and I will roll it back to a known bug and create like a fork of the repo that's our interview repo. And then we take that known bug and we open an issue that was the issue that was opened that solved this bug, and we pair program on it, right? So I'm here to help you get any context you need on the code base, but I'm not going to give you the answer. So then you can use me as the senior dev on your team to help you like get to where you need to go contextually, but then you have to actually solve the problem. And I make sure that it's something that's usually scopable to 30 to 40 minutes so that it's not a ridiculous amount of time. And again, the goal isn't to solve the bug. It's to how well do you navigate a code base you haven't seen before? What types of questions are you going to ask when you do get put into unfamiliar code? Are you trying to understand how it works, or are you trying to like quiz me in a way that gets me to give you the answer? Right? Mm-hmm. Those are all things that tell me a lot about how you're going to work on a team, how you're going to interact with your teammates on a day-to-day basis. Are you going to be collaborative, or are you going to be just trying to get your work done and get out of there and leave everybody else to their own devices? Each of those things is a it's a signal to me about how well you're going to match on the team and how well you're going to dive into the code base that you're about to receive. That being said, not every company is going to run their tech interviews that way. So if you do get into a live coding interview, my advice is try to breathe and relax, because if you're very nervous, that tends to put a weird tone on the interview that can make it go sour, even if it wasn't a bad interview. And remember that a healthy company is pulling for you. They want you to do well. So if you don't know something, say, I'm not sure, but here's how I would look it up. Or I don't know that off the top of my head, but I know I would find it in this section of the documentation. Something like that shows that you do know this information. You just haven't memorized the specific syntax thereafter. Or similarly, you can say, like, I'm unfamiliar with that concept. I didn't take a computer science degree, so I don't know what that is. And they can either take that as a sign of you being able to admit that you don't know things, and that's a good sign, which I would take it as, or they can take it as you failed their trivia test and you weren't going to get that job anyways.
Yeah, exactly. But also it's related to the red flags. Sometimes you want to hear from that interview to say that, no, you can look it up. You have to know it. And as someone being interviewed, you said, okay, now I know what's the culture behind the hiring of this company, and now I don't want to work for them.
Right. And obviously it's a privilege to be able to say no to a job, but it is helpful if you can see some of the patterns of behavior where companies treat their employees poorly. It can be helpful if you do have the option to say, I don't think I want to join a company that's going to be like this. Like, I don't want to have to prove myself to my coworkers every day. That's a place that you don't want to be, because it's just going to make you sad and stressed all the time.
Yeah, agree. Sarah, you want to go?
Yeah, I just want to read one of the audience comment as well. After this video, I will visit your YouTube channel and watch all of your videos. You're awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, my next question. So let's also help product manager. I'm a product manager, so I want to also get the advantage of this session. So I want to ask about my biggest challenge when I joined a big company, a large scale company, which has a very technical product. And it was like overwhelming, the amount of stuff that I had to learn. And I asked them to list the tools, the library, and everything that we are using. It was like many third-party tools that we were using. And the technical architect was super difficult for me to understand. And I was like, want to sit and cry, oh, how difficult is it to learn this product? And I want to ask, what's your advice? Did you give someone like me that feels overwhelmed by amount of the things that they have to learn?
I think it will always take time to ramp up on a tool. And depending on how complex the tool is, that could be 30 days, it could be 90 days. And in a healthy company culture, people recognize how complicated things are and they're willing to help. So I think that as you climb into a new code base and a new company and you're trying to figure out how everything fits together, the thing that I try to do is start with the happy path and try to understand, who is the customer and like, who do we sell to? Because those are the, if it's a dev tools company, what types of developers are we trying to appeal to? Because that helps me understand what, who are we even talking to? Who is this even for? And then understanding how do they benefit from this product? And that helps kind of go down the path of like, okay, so somebody has a problem. I now understand what that problem is. I understand who they are. And I understand that why they would reach to our company in the first place, what product they would be asking about. And once they use that product, how does that product improve their lives? Because that starts to tease apart where are the highest value sections of this product. Because for example, like when I worked at Netlify, what we were trying to do at the time was help front-end developers get ideas out of their heads and onto the internet as fast as possible. So if that was the goal, then certain areas of the product I didn't have to care about them because they weren't related to what I was there to do. Right. So knowing how the DevOps team was managing their log drains, it was academically interesting because I love hearing how people are doing that stuff. But it didn't affect my ability to help our customers or to work on the product. Right. And similarly, like the product team would use a combination of Trello and Linear and some other ones. And they kind of cycled through them because they couldn't find one that fit just right. And I never had to care about any of that. Right. We had decided that the way that product would communicate with engineering was through GitHub issues. And if that was the case, then we knew that we could comfortably say, I don't have to worry about the suite of software as a service that's being used by this team because it's not for me to track. Like I can go in there if I'm interested, the credentials are available, but why? Like what all I'm doing is trying to, micromanage somebody else's job if I get in there. So I think by trying to understand, who's the customer, what's the problem we solve, how does our product solve that problem, and what's my role in that journey, you're able to kind of identify the spots that are immediately valuable and that are critically valuable. And then from there, you can widen the map and understand more and more of how the company fits together and how all the different pieces are connected. But after the critical path, everything else is sort of as needed, right? Like, I don't know of anybody in a company over the size of, say, 75 that knows every part of the company. It's just not possible. Even the CEO starts to lose track of exactly what's going on and exactly how everything fits together because teams necessarily build systems for themselves. And it's not important for me, who's not on the team, to understand a different team's internal processes and tools. So that to me is sort of my first exercise is understanding the hierarchy of what's important for me to understand. And then also just giving myself some permission to, you don't have to know it on day one, and you probably won't know it for a month. And figuring out who the people are who are like the keepers of that knowledge that'll help you on your journey as you get into day 1 to day 30. When you do have a question, there's going to be somebody who's like the company encyclopedia about the product org or about the engineering org or whatever that will happily answer your questions on like why this thing is the way it is or where we go when we have this kind of question.
Cool. Great. Thank you. Okay, I will ask one question also from audience. Amir is asking, what is the best way to express ourselves to HR hiring manager to get our very first job as a junior? As you already know, it's a tough time for juniors, thanks to layoffs.
It's really hard. I think this is probably the hardest moment that in my career that I've seen for someone to get their first job. And I think that it's due in part to the layoffs. It's due to the fact that because a lot of companies are hiring remotely, the applicant pool is enormous for every job. And I also think there's some bad advice going around out there telling people to apply to everything, to lie about what they're capable of, and to misrepresent their experience. And all of that is leading to recruiters being more hesitant to accept a resume at face value. So instead, they're starting to turn toward referrals. And referrals have always been a huge, huge impact on how people get hired. Network is everything. Today, I think it's even more important because as the number of applications, I saw a job today come across my Twitter feed that had something like 5,000 applications. And I don't know how you stand out as a resume among 5,000 applications. What I do know, though, is that if you've got a network, you might be able to get someone to introduce you to that hiring manager. And then that hiring manager has your resume on top of the stack of 5,000, which gives you a much better shot. So my advice for juniors is build as much as you can in public. So try things out, publish what you learn. Even if what you're publishing is you followed a tutorial, give credit that it's a tutorial so it doesn't look like you're trying to pass off somebody's work as your own. But publish it, show that you built it, show that you've deployed it. You figured out how to take this thing from somebody else's tutorial and you got it onto the internet as an example. Learn whatever you can, build your own site, build it a bunch of times and publish all the different versions so that people can see what you did. If I, as a hiring manager, am looking for an early career engineer, what I'm looking for is somebody who's shown me that they are motivated and capable of learning. And if I can see your progress over 6 months and I can look at the project from 6 months ago and the project from yesterday and see advancement, then I know that you are putting in the work and that you're capable of learning and that you're interested in this stuff, because you've got 6 months of consistent shipping and you've got 6 months of progress that I can see in the comparison of your older projects to your newer ones. To me, that's a strong signal that you are, you're in this because you're having fun, because you're learning. And I value that highly among juniors, because one of the things that's impossible is you can't hire a junior that you know can do the job, because the definition of a junior is that they do not have experience, right? So what I think that the industry is getting this wrong, where they're saying that junior positions need to have 3 to 5 years experience. And I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to guarantee that the junior they hire is going to succeed, right? The companies that are doing this right understand that the ideal junior developer is one that is excited and motivated and capable of learning and collaborating. If I can find somebody who's going to fit well on the team, who's excited about this stuff and who's going to learn quickly, I'm so much more excited about that junior hire than somebody with 3 to 5 years experience who's still at a junior level. To me, that's somebody who I can teach the habits. I can teach them to do things the way that we've decided is a best practice in our company, as opposed to somebody who's got 5 years of experience where I have to unteach them all of the habits that they have from their previous jobs to fit into the engineering culture that we have on our team, right? So putting that work out in public and doing as much as you can to be a participant in the online sphere, like be helpful, join Discord, join whatever, and try to be friendly and supportive, right? It's not about being a know-it-all. It's not about showing everybody how smart you are. It's about participating and being part of the community and showing folks that you're here to help everyone, right? You want to succeed in this career and you want everyone around you to succeed as well. Because if I see somebody come into my Discord or if I see somebody who's showing up on social media and they're always kind of posting and helping and replying and just kind of generally being a proactive member of the community, they start to register. I start to remember their name. And if they're always a good influence and they're clearly demonstrating growth through these projects they're putting out, if I see somebody asking for junior devs and I know that hiring manager, I might slip them a list of names. And I do that a lot, where I say, hey, I've been watching these 3 or 4 people. You should hit them up. Yeah. So network is going to be your real secret. Like, that's the secret if you want to get a first job quickly. But quickly is a relative term, because building a network is not something that you do overnight. It's something that you do for months before you need it, right? Like, it should be 90% give and 10% take for a healthy relationship.
Yeah. You talked about the projects that, even if it's tutorial, as we have a Telegram group that we review resumes for people who wants to apply for jobs. We see a lot of times there is a GitHub link that you open. There are some projects, but I still see a lot of problems with using GitHub right. So I think they should use a special repository of GitHub that you build a profile, pin your good projects, change the README of each project from the default, like Create React App one. Use services like Netlify or Versal to give a free. It's free for everyone, and you can have a live version of that. My point is, it's hard to expect someone to go to your GitHub, go to the repositories tab, open a project, clone it into their system to see if it's working. You need to help them. You need to sell it. And that's also a point of, if I join your company, this is how detailed I am on the product side. I can help your product. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is there any other questions, Sarah?
Yeah, there are many questions, but if you want to, because I know you have a big list of questions, so you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
go ahead with your next one, and I will ask the next question.
Well, I have a few about like sharing on LinkedIn and Twitter and also networking, but you almost covered all of it. Um, um, you worked on some big companies like IBM and well, also on like Gatsby and Netlify. I don't know the scale. Well, I know the scale of impact they have on the whole market, but like on the size of like how many people are working there. How do you compare working with a small company versus a big company?
So every company has unique challenges, right? If you've got a big company like IBM has a lot of resources, a lot of stability. You are not in a situation where you have to worry about things going horribly wrong. It just doesn't move fast enough for that. So one of the big benefits of a giant company that's, let's say, 1,000 plus people, you're looking at a company that is, they've broken the tech and the duties apart into small chunks. And so the upside of that is that you get to clock out at 5 p.m. and go home. Like, you don't have to care. That's like, you'll have pager duty, but it's not about you're one of 5 devs holding the whole company together, and if something goes wrong or something's not done, if you don't do it, no one else will. This is a company that's going to have a global staff that's around the clock working on things and making progress, and you have your small part of it, but it's not, you're not going to take the company down by deciding to take a weekend. And I really valued that about IBM, where I worked on a given week 35 to 45 hours, depending on whether we were launching something or not. And that was consistent. When I was done, I was done. I didn't even bring my laptop home a lot of the time. I just leave it in the office. And that was perfectly okay, because that was how the company worked. There was no expectation of nights or weekends. And if you have pager duty, like we were a pretty strong team, so we'd have pager duty, but nobody really got paged. So that was great. The downside, of course, is that it's a big company and there are a lot of people that have to sign off on everything. I had a manager, and then I had, my manager's manager and his manager and his manager. And that was before we even got to like the executive level of the company. So if I wanted to get something done, if it was small, my manager could approve it. But if it was bigger than my manager could approve, there was a decent chance it was going to have to go through 4 layers of approval before it could get back to me. And that was only vertical, because there were also 32 teams on the IBM Cloud product, which was the product that I worked on. And for me to make a change to IBM Cloud meant I needed 32 teams and 32 managers to agree that it was the right choice to change the product. And it was very, very slow. And when I first showed up at IBM, I had an initial quick win, that project that I talked about earlier, where I sped up a dashboard and did that proof of concept with GraphQL. And my manager, his boss, and his boss all liked it so much that they wanted me to roll it out further, right? So that was within my first 6 months at IBM. My remaining 12 months at the company, I spent in meetings trying to get other people convinced to try the thing. And that was what ultimately led to me leaving the company. Was I found it so frustrating that something that was so clearly, demonstrably better than what we were doing before, like we had the data, was taking over a year to roll out, because other teams were worried about, well, what does this mean for our pager duty? How do we assign control for this? Does this mean that our code has to all be thrown away? Does this mean we're going to get fired? These are all very valid concerns, right? And it wasn't that I disagreed with the reasoning for why we were having these meetings, but I disagreed with the pace. It very much disagreed with me as a developer. And so I've personally decided that big companies like that are not a good match for me. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I joined Gatsby when it was 10, 15 people. I was one of the very first hires there, and that company was absolute chaos. And the joke was I got hired without a job title. They just hired me because they were like, you're a good engineer. We just need engineers. I was like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, whatever you think is most important. Right. And so that is like, there's a lot of upside to that. If you're someone like me who is novelty driven, who likes the experimentation, who doesn't mind the complete chaos of like, here's your blank sheet of paper, go make something good. So I had a lot of fun in the early days of Gatsby, and it really was only that I had some pretty big moral differences with the founders of that company, or I probably would have stuck around a whole lot longer. Netlify was in the middle. I joined Netlify when it was, I think, 75 people, and I stayed until they hit 300. And I watched them go. I showed up right as they were no longer a small company. They were learning how to be a medium-sized company, and then they were trying to grow as fast as they could toward a large company. And so I watched them go from almost no processes to, by the time I left, a lot of processes. And I see how companies build these and why they need them. And so the strength of Netlify was that when I joined, it had the agility of a small company, but it had the resources of a larger company, not IBM resources by any means, but enough resources that if I wanted to, say, fly my team together to like focus on a project for a week and do planning, that was in the budget. We could do that. If I wanted to put together a project for the community and create a bunch of swag and get like, a pretty hefty investment, like tens of thousands of dollars to give everybody pajama pants, that was within the realm of possibility because the company had the resources to do that. As it grew, I started to see those old problems that I was running into at IBM, where I would see a very clear, like, this is a problem and we need to fix it. And then I would find myself in weeks of meetings where people would say, I see why it's a problem, but is it the right thing to change? And I was like, well, what are we going to do instead? And they're like, well, nothing. It's like, okay, but why would we do nothing? And they're like, because then we don't have to do anything. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't like seeing this creep back into a company where the default is inertia, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it very much depends on what part of the machine you want to be. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this, right? There's Simon Wardley is a great speaker and talks a lot about the ways that companies fit together. But one of the concepts that he has that I love is this idea of work archetypes and where they're valuable and where they flourish inside a company. So there's these three archetypes of pioneers, town settlers, and city planners. A pioneer is someone who thrives on chaos, who thrives on the unknown, who's going to wander off and look for something that can be solved and then kind of proof of concept. A town settler is somebody who's going to take that proof of concept and try to transform it from like a glimmer of hope into an actual product. So we saw that, hey, you can solve a problem with this, but can we productize it? Can we take it from this like cool thing into something that somebody will value enough to pay for and become a customer for a long time? And then there are city planners, and city planners are people who take those products and make them scale to infinity. Somebody who's running DevOps or who's optimizing the backend for performance so that it can take millions of concurrent users, or all of these very, very complicated and very, very valuable tasks, right? So at each level of the stack, we need these people. But if you take a pioneer and you put them into a DevOps role, if they're part of the keep the wheels on the machine, they're going to be miserable. It doesn't matter how good they are. They're in the wrong fit. Right. And if you take somebody who wants the stability of a city planner job and you put them into an R&D role, they're going to panic because they're not going to know what to work on. They're not going to know, they don't understand what the clear value is because they're looking at too many unknowns, and that's not their personality type. So I've learned I fit right on the cusp of, I'm mostly pioneer with a little bit of town settler, right? If I'm at a company that's in that stage, if I'm at a company that's in the let's see what product market fit looks like. Let's see how we get this to be something that somebody will give us the first dollar for, I thrive. When we cross that line and we've got the product and now we're starting to see how do we get this product to vertically scale and go higher up in the chain of the sales process, I just start to feel kind of like, okay, but I'm ready to do something exciting. Like, what happens next? And so I think we all have to do that reflection, I think, and decide which type of developer we are, because it informs what types of companies you apply to. Like, if you're a pioneer, an agency could be a wonderful job for you because every day is a new day. It's pure chaos all the time. Every project is brand new. If you're a city planner, you do not get an agency job. You're going to be miserable. Right. And vice versa. If you're a pioneer, maybe don't go try to work in the depths of IBM, because you're not going to have the freedom to go and do the R&D and chaos unless you get a very specific job inside of IBM, which would be in their R&D department or one of those. I think this was the longest answer to a question that you could have possibly expected, right?
but really good perspective. The fit, and I actually have a follow-up on that. You first talked about that. Yes, not everyone had the luxury of choosing the company. That sometimes you have to choose a company, but there is also a different scenario that for a lot of like currently your viewer right now in the live, there are people who wants to move to another country. It's not just the job, right? So you're going to first you need to pass that 7 level of interviewing. You need to, well, you probably don't know about our passport rate. It's if you go to the like visa power, you need to screw a lot to get to our passports. But so after getting visa, you moving to another culture of city. People speaks in a different language. Like, well, I live in Netherlands, and a lot of like most of people speaking English, but there are lots of countries who even finding English speakers could be challenging. It's a new company, new probably industry. You need to figure out finding a house, settle down, register for the address, and it's tons of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you also need to take care of your mental health. It's not just about getting your first job, getting to it, and because it could make bigger problems and get to. And we will. I'm going to ask you about this, like burnout or like having a problem with other teammates. But I was wondering, what are your thoughts on what are the good culture that like, well, not in the personal level. Well, when you talk about like fit. A good fit, yes, that's your type of personality as a developer to fit in a product industry or a company. But like good culture signs and also the red flags that you need to run before even accepting that.
This answer is either going to be far too long or far too short. I think I'll stick with the short version because I don't want to take up the rest of our time. The biggest red flags that I've seen are when companies try to convince you that they're a family. If they use language that makes it sound like there's something beyond the transactional exchange of you do work that the company is willing to pay for, because it's inherently one-sided. Because it gets leveraged against you, oh, you're a family at work, and of course you would stay late to help out your family, right? And then when you say my like family member is sick and I need to take time off to like take care of my family member, they fire you because you're not useful to them anymore, right? It's an inherently one-sided relationship. And companies that recognize that work is a utilitarian thing, we go to work because we need a paycheck, right? And if your management understands that, then they understand as well that it's not mutually exclusive to look at work as a paycheck and also want to do very good work, right? I love doing great work. Yep. I don't care at all about if my company makes bad management decisions. I'm not going to take that damage for them. They are going to take that damage themselves, right? I will do what I was hired to do to the best of my ability because I'm proud of doing good work. I will not go outside of my, committed time for the company because they aren't pulling their weight, right? That's what I think is a huge red flag, is when the company's basically saying like, we need you to sacrifice for us because this is a family. and it's a sneaky tactic, and they do it all the time. And it's not like, I don't think it's always done with full evil intent either. I think that people who start companies want their companies to feel good to be at, and if they're not thinking about the implications of the language they use, they accidentally create this. And I've seen this. One of the not my companies, but another company with somebody I was really close to, they talked about being a family all the time, and when things got hard was the first time they realized that that's not how that works. And suddenly the founders are like on calls with employees who are quitting because the situation was terrible. And they're crying and telling the employees that they just used them. They just took advantage of them. You just used me so that you'd be able to buy a house. And it's like, well, what do you think a job is? Like, yes, I got a job here so that I could afford to buy a house. That's literally what a job is. and so there's this this sort of like naivety that goes into it, which is also a red flag because it shows an inexperienced leader. And so to me, though, those are the biggest ones, is when the leadership has this either intentionally evil, we're a family, so we need you to burn yourself out on our behalf, or naive, I'm a first-time founder and I think everything can be perfect all the time with no problem, so hey, we're a family. I think the other ones are more around like, whoever apologizes. Like, when things go wrong, what happens? Does leadership say, we made a mistake and here's what we did wrong and here's how we've changed our behavior so that it won't happen again? Or do they say something like, oh, the prevailing market conditions led to a subpar outcome, and we're sorry if that made you sad, right? Like that type of language, like if a company is built around never looking weak, never accepting responsibility, that means that they will absolutely throw you under the bus if it makes it look like the company's still strong. You're looking for the company that, like, the strongest leaders are the ones that can say they don't know, the ones that can say they made a mistake. If you can stand up in front of your whole company and say, I have no idea what I'm doing and I did this all the way wrong. Here's who I've hired to fill this knowledge gap so that this never happens again. That's a leader that I'm ready to go to war for, because they clearly understand that this is bigger than one person. If they're trying to preserve this facade, this kind of titan of industry facade where clearly I'm the one with all the answers, what do you think is happening behind the scenes? They're burning people up and spitting them in the gutter. That's it's not a sustainable culture. And you hear that every time you hear about a company with a godlike leadership. You're going to find behind the scenes, as you get into the whisper network, they hurt a lot of people behind the scenes and then they just control the spin.
Yeah. Well, there are two sides of this story. There's like, we are a family. That's something they advertise. But the other, the taking responsibility, the thing is you need to join first. And then you're in the middle of something that you need to deal with. Yeah. It's going to be harder. Yeah.
It's really hard. Like, one of the things that I do in interviews is I try to treat interviews as a two-way street. I'm interviewing the company as well. So I ask questions like, can you tell me about a time that the company got something wrong? What happened? Can you tell me about a time you had a conflict with leadership? How did you resolve it? Ask the manager. Can you tell me about a time that you got into a conflict with somebody who was in your reporting chain? What happened and how did you handle it? Like, when was the last time that I don't know, leadership like apologize for something? How do you find information? How do you know where the product roadmap is? When was the last time the product roadmap changed? These types of questions, you'll get a really clear sense really quickly. If you ask about the product roadmap and everybody in the interview process has their eyes just go really big, you're in for a chaotic workplace. Right. Yeah. And they might not tell you outright, like, well, leadership doesn't really have their shit together, so they're gonna change the roadmap every week after they have a meeting with some other investor. But they will tell you, like, well, our product roadmap is a little chaotic, and so we have to be adaptive. It's a very fast-paced environment, right? They'll say stuff like that. And if everybody says something like that, you can kind of get the vibe like, oh, okay, there's no roadmap here. Like, there's no plan. You're just walking into into chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. That was a very good point. Actually, now I was thinking for the next interview when I joined, when I checked the list of the feedback and the Glassdoor, the people that said, oh, this is not good. I will come up with some question. For example, I was thinking, which question can I ask to understand if they are poor in execution, or people when they say they're unhappy with the executive or the management. But I don't know how to ask this kind of question to see, was it a valid comment that they posted in the Glassdoor, or is it just the one-time feeling that the management is not good, the company is not good in execution?
When I get a bad vibe like that, I find somebody who used to work at the company. Like, I look for an ex-employee and I just hit them up and I'm like, hey, I'm interviewing with this company. And like, I've had ex-employees, I've said, I'm looking to interview at this company. Would you be willing to take some time to talk to me about it? And they say, we don't need to take any time. Don't work there. You can hit up, if you get one, maybe that's just somebody who had a bad experience. But if you hit up 2 or 3 ex-employees and every single one of them is like, you're going to have a bad time. Right. Or if they all say that they're under NDA and can't discuss, it's definitely going to be a bad time, right? So that's something that I've looked at, is like, can you easily find an ex-employee of the company? And if you talk to them, do they say, yeah, it was just time for me to go. I had kind of hit the end of what I thought I could accomplish there, and I got this really good other opportunity. Like, that's a great time, because my former manager at IBM, I would definitely recommend people go work either at IBM or for this manager who's now at JP Morgan. Because that manager, when he felt that an employee was reaching the end of their tenure, he would start working on a plan to get them out to their next adventure. He'd look at internal transfers, he'd look at other options, and if it didn't work out, then he would, write a glowing recommendation to get that person to their next job. Because it's that type of healthy understanding that jobs are not forever. We've left the world where a job is going to give you forever stability. Jobs last 2 years, 5 if we're lucky. That's just the unfortunate nature of tech right now. And a manager who recognizes this understands that those relationships go far beyond the jobs. Like, if I burn an employee because they don't want to be at this company anymore, later on, that employee is going to go somewhere else. They're going to advance. They're going to get promoted, and maybe they're going to be my boss someday. Do I really want to find out that somebody that I was mean to on behalf of a company that I don't even work at anymore is now going to be like, have a vendetta against me personally because I decided this company's feelings were more important than this human's feelings? Like, there's so many little signs of how companies treat people and move them through systems, and the people in the industry that I would absolutely, like, anything they needed, I will drop it and go help them. None of us work at the same companies anymore. Every single one of us has moved on 2 or 3 times since we worked together, but they all had the same outlook, which is that, like, we are people in this together and we're trying to get the best outcomes for everybody. And that includes the company. Me staying in a company when I don't want to be there is not good for the company. It just rots morale from the inside to have people at a company who are just grumpy in every meeting, right? And so I think having those conversations, try to get the vibe from current employees. If you get any weird vibes, try to find ex-employees, and just, you'll find out very, very quickly what the whisper network is like on these companies. And almost all of them will leave it up on LinkedIn, even if they don't publicize that they left.
Yeah. So I want to know, when do you decide it is a time to leave a company? What sign do you see that say, okay, now it's time, I have to quit?
There are a few that are easy. Like, when I left Gatsby, it was because the leadership was doing stuff that I found morally unconscionable. They were making choices that I could not allow myself to get behind because of my ethics. At other companies, it's less clear. Like, sometimes it's just a drifting apart, right? And I think it's similar to any other relationship where, this sounds very cold, but, like, relationships are utilitarian. They need to have an equal exchange of value. If I'm going to have anyone or anything in my life, it should be because that thing is making my life a little bit better, and they should have me in their life because I'm making their life a little bit better. In the case of a company, I'm fairly compensated. I'm getting advancement. I'm treated well. I'm getting projects that I'm interested in. And because they give me that, I provide work that helps them, increase their profitability, makes their team more efficient, gives, improves morale and helps them with retention, gives them the ability to recruit more easily, whatever it is, right? That is a fair exchange of value. If it starts to tip and I feel like the company is stripping away, like they don't want to support the ideas that I have, they're not really ready to dedicate any resources toward things that I feel pretty strongly are important. And it's not like they don't give me everything I want, but if they start never giving me the stuff that I think is important, and they're like, oh, we don't have the bandwidth right now, we got to focus on these big things, and it's all enterprise sales. And I'm like, okay, but enterprise sales isn't going to get us enterprise pipeline. Enterprise sales isn't going to get us new developers trying out the platform. We need to focus on those things too. And they say, we just can't. And then I'm feeling like the thing that I was hired to do no longer matches up with the thing that they're asking me to do. That's going to burn me out, just because Sarah Drasner has this great quote about burnout. Burnout is not about the amount of hours that you work. Burnout is about the amount of effort you put in a direction that's not aligned with who you are and what you want to do. Right. And when a company starts to change your job description through what they actually assign you, that's a recipe for burnout. And if you start to feel that, if the company starts twisting what your job role is and you don't feel that it's going in the way that you want it to go, and if you try to course correct it, they're not willing to work with you, it starts to feel a little one-sided. You're no longer getting the recognition or the fulfillment or the additional learning or advancement. You're just doing stuff that they think is important and you don't like it. The relationship is out of balance now, right? And I think there's this wonderful quote about relationships, and this is about interpersonal relationships, but I think it applies here, which is that a relationship has to be between equals. If somebody in the relationship becomes the caretaker, it's impossible to continue to respect the person that you're taking care of. Like if somebody becomes dependent on you and you were supposed to be equals, like it's very different, like a parent-child relationship. You go in knowing that you're there as a caretaker. But if I go in with a partner and that partner is supposed to be my equal and I find myself always taking care of the partner or vice versa, the respect disappears because the agreement was not honored. And a company's like that. If the company brings you in to do a thing and then they change the rules and you're expected to just dote on them and they give nothing back, you're now a caretaker of the company. You can't continue to respect the company. That breeds resentment, that breeds burnout, that breeds all sorts of things that are just not good for anyone. It's going to poison your team. It's going to burn you out to where you won't be able to take another job for a while because you're going to need time to recover, or it's going to create these sort of bad psychological scars that will make working at future companies hard because you'll be carrying a lot of baggage there. All of this stuff is really, really dangerous. So when you start to feel that happening, notice it quickly and try to get ahead of it. Like point it out to your manager, see if you can change your project, see if there's an internal transfer that can be done, like anything that can rectify the situation before it goes bad. And if the company's not willing to work with you, that's a clear signal that they don't care. And that's your sign to get out, I think.
Cool. Thank you.
And an add-on to that is by noticing that early enough, you have the energy to go apply at other jobs while still working your job. If you wait until you're burned out, that gets so much harder.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I don't know, like our 1 hour time is over, but if you if you still have time, I can ask some questions from audience.
I can do like 10 more minutes.
Okay, cool. So I will read one appreciation feedback first. Hey, Jason, first of all, I learned Gatsby and RTK with you and want to thank you in person.
Thank you so much. I'm glad it was helpful.
And next question, one of our challenges PR reviews. Big PRs are hard to review. Small PRs cause context switching overhead. Also, async communication is tough for teams. How do you handle this in big teams?
So scoping a PR is really hard because if every PR is 1 or 2 lines of code, it's hard to understand what it all adds up to. But if every PR is 1,000 lines of code, who's got time for that? So there are a few ways that I've seen this done that I would get behind. One of them is review as you go, pair program. Work with somebody else on your team as you're coding, because then you're going to catch most of the big stuff as part of the PR. The other thing that can be done, which is really nice, is I worked on a team where there were 14 of us. This is at IBM. And what our manager would do was break us into squads within the team of 3. So there'd be a senior dev and 2 like junior or mid-level devs, and they would take on a story. We did agile there, so we would pick some thread of work that we were going to go take on, and that squad had really high context on the code because we were all working on the same problems. So we had different tickets, but it was all within the same context and code base. By doing that, what ended up happening was the code reviews started to feel a little more like, I see, like, what you wrote here is going to cause a problem later because this code isn't doing what you think it does. Or like we had done all the things like add prettier and get rid of the, we didn't fight about formatting or any of those things. Those were all automated. That's a big one. Just do that. But then the other piece was we had kind of decided as a team that what we cared about was the outcome. Does it do what it needs to do in a way that won't break if it has to change later? And so that led to the PRs being scoped down in what we were reviewing. And then something that I really loved from a team that I wasn't on was the front end team at Netlify that was led by Leslie Cohen-Wine. They set up a review process that was beautiful, where they had like 4 or 5 tiers of feedback, where one was like, this is blocking feedback, you can't do this. Like if you did something that was definitely inaccessible or definitely would have a memory leak or something like that. And then they would ratchet it down to like, I would like to address this, but you don't have to. And then at the bottom of the tier was like, this is just me making a comment. There's no action required, or like only if you're already in here. And so they kind of went from like boulders down to dust was the way that they would classify. And what I loved about that was that it allowed you to have feedback that you knew wasn't blocking. And it gave you the ability to like give feedback in a way that was open without sending the implication that every piece of feedback had to be addressed right now or the PR couldn't merge. And that led to more open communication between the teams. I also like the idea of doing a work in progress PR where you create the branch, make one change, and then open the PR as a draft, and then continually make changes in that PR so that you can get like fractional code reviews. Like I did a big piece of logic. Can somebody come look at this with me? And you get a review on that piece, but you're not done with the whole feature yet. So it's not like saying I'm ready to merge this, but rather I did something that I think was big enough that it needs a code review, but it's not the full feature yet. So can you come look at this with me now? And then you get somebody to come in and do that. And it removes the challenge of like, I need you to come in and build the context of this entire feature all at once. Or I need you to look at these 3 lines of code and then imagine how they'll fit into the broader picture, right? So I thought that was a good way of doing it as well. All that is to say, there's not like a surefire, this is going to work no matter what. It's all going to come down to how the team communicates and how much respect they have for each other. Because a code review, no matter how it's scoped, is only as good as the respect the team has for each other. And I've seen teams with high respect do multi-thousand line code reviews and it works really well. And teams with low respect, they can't even get, 3-line changes merged because they're just bickering at each other all the time. So that's sort of a non-answer, but I would say there are a lot of techniques in there to try, and hopefully one of them will fit for your team.
Yeah. I'm cutting a lot of questions, but I'm glad it got to the respect part, because a few videos ago on your YouTube channel, you talked about the brilliant jerk, the toxic teammate you might have. And I want to hear your thoughts on how to deal with them as a manager, and more importantly, as we are like people working for companies right now, how to deal with them as a teammate.
As a manager, I think you treat it like you would any other like infraction. You know, if somebody's being a brilliant jerk, you explain the behavior, or you explain the impact of the behavior, and you explain that it's not going to be tolerated, and then you ask them to work through how they're going to, like, what would you like to change, and how do you want me to encourage you on this? And if they refuse to do it, you write them up, and if they refuse to do it again, you pip them, and if they continue to refuse, you fire them. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you make the team bad, you're hurting it. As a teammate, I think the ultimate shield, as unfortunate as this is documentation. Keep track of how conversations go, where are decisions made. If you're in a meeting and somebody says something, like, keep a decision log so that you can go back and point out that this brilliant jerk is not allowing anyone but themselves to make decisions or control outputs, or even sometimes commit code. And if you can take a documented case to leadership, if it's good, is going to see that and immediately realize that this is a huge problem, and they're going to deal with it. If you take it to leadership and they don't seem to think it's a problem, you can start applying for new jobs.
Yeah, I mean, it can get tricky because you see the jerk part, they see the brilliant part,
and that's why I think the documentation is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah, because one of the things that's really easy for management to look at is lines of code committed, and this can lead to brilliant jerks being bigger jerks because they start to recognize lines of code as their sole value. So I think that becomes. This is why documentation is so important. You have to show that to get to those lines of code, here are all the things that suffered along the way.
Yeah.
And again, it's got to be a partnership between you and management, because I have seen cases where you can sort of manage sideways, but one, that's not your job. You are not there to be a manager or a therapist. So, you can do it if you care about the person, but if it's just somebody who's making your job hard, don't take a second job. Like, make it management's problem. And if management doesn't care, then make replacing you management's problem.
Yeah.
Like, they'll learn one way or the other. If everybody on their team quits except the jerk, well, then maybe it'll be that manager and their jerk, and they'll just be happy. Or they'll realize that the jerk is costing them more teammates than they care to replace, and they'll solve the problem eventually. But either way, they have to feel the pain. Like, a company won't change if the teammates absorb all the damage. The team has to let pain flow upward into leadership so that leadership can understand that there is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Okay, I don't have much questions, but if Sarah has anything to ask.
No, I just want to thank you again, Jason, and I really appreciate your time. And it was a very insightful session. And as usual, I always give the stage to our guest to have some, like, if you want to say anything. So who are planning to apply for a job in tech industry and they want to immigrate to another country, and this is a difficult situation at the moment, and so they're applying. We had the people, they applied 1,000 times, and then finally they got the job offer. So we had many stories like that, and I know that at that moment there might be so many people that are disappointed and they're frustrated through the process. So yeah, so stage is yours. Say whatever you like to our audience.
It is probably one of the most challenging times in my memory to get into this field, but it's still one of the best fields to get into in terms of, income mobility and the ability to just kind of do puzzles all day for paychecks. Like, this is a great place to be. And it's a great, for all of its issues, tech is still probably the most rewarding industry that I can think of. So patience is going to pay off. Continue shipping, continue building, get into the network and try to become part of that social network so that you've got that leverage there. And stay patient, try not to get discouraged. I feel like the pattern in this industry is that nothing happens for a long time and then everything happens all at once. I've got several friends who were looking for their first job, nothing would happen, and they'd get a year in of looking for jobs, and then they'd suddenly have 4 job interviews or job offers, and it was like the flip switched, or the switch flipped, and suddenly everybody recognized their value, right? And I don't know how to make that faster, but I do know that it happens if you stick to it. So keep learning, keep playing, keep publishing, keep sharing, and it will eventually happen. If you want a friend along the way, I'm live a couple times a week. I am at learnwithjason.dev, and there's links there to all the different social media platforms that I'm on. And come hang out and have a buddy along the way. There's a good community of us who just like to build and learn.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. It was very nice, and you're so kind and nice person. It was great. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Payman, for reaching to Jason and asking him to join the session.
Thank you. I did the easiest job. I just emailed him. He was so kind to agree. I still can't believe that this happened.
Me either. Me either.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. I'm glad you reached out.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
good
y'all. Good luck,
day.
everyone.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.